You're listening to Served Up, a podcast that features inspiring beverage professionals and topic experts that share their passions through meaningful conversations. I'm your host, Bridget Albert, also known as a Market Fresh Mixologist, an industry mentor with decades of experience. Grab a cocktail and sit back. Let's learn how we can make a positive impact in our industry. Hey, y'all, it's Bridget here. Guest hostess Jessica Baldo Reggio and I had the chance to chat with Diego Cantu. He is the managing director of Mezcales Atresanales at Casa Lumbre, where he leads the strategy, production, and growth of the company's mezcal portfolio. With a background in engineering and operation, he brings deep expertise. His leadership is central to Casa Lumbre's mission of crafting innovative, high-quality agave spirits rooted in tradition and sustainability. Through his work, he is helping to shape the future of mezcal, both on a national and global scale. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a shot of mezcal, and enjoy this episode. On behalf of Jessica and I, today I want to welcome you to Served Up.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you.
Welcome. Yeah, you're absolutely welcome. Can you tell our listeners about your backstory? Where did you come from? Did you always think that you were going to be in beverage someday?
Well, not when I was studying. Let's say I started with my engineering degree. I'm a mechatronic engineer. When I was studying, I was more hoping on being, for instance, on the motor industry or other kind of industry, that typical for engineers. But I ended up after a job fair during my final years of my career, that I got an interview in Domecq that at that time was starting to get owned by Pernod Ricard, and that's how I entered. That was like maybe I guess like 14 years ago. So I got my first job in Pernod Ricard, all the time in operations, mainly in a distillery. Well, it was not a distillery. It was a blending facility here in Mexico City for brandy, very famous brandies that they have. And I was performing there as an intern. So I started my internship there. And that's how I started in this industry. And it caught me up. And I really like it. So all my career, just maybe by two other positions that I did outside of the industry that they didn't last more than 1 year, I've been in this industry. So I'm very happy to be here, and I think it's an industry that caught my attention.
Diego, how did you? So very interesting, right? Intern to being in this industry all these years. How did you really pivot from being in, what did you say, an engineering degree to blending and then being in this industry for 15 plus years at this point?
Well, I think in operations in the industry, let's say in manufacturing especially, engineering is a big part of it. So it's not very apart from what I always liked. I think it's just a way of applied engineering is done there a lot of the time, especially in all the processes. So it was not that far away, but probably it's not the first thing or the first job position that pops into your mind when you speak about engineering, right? But it's very closely related into it.
It's really interesting. And I know you have a deep affection as well for mezcal. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, for sure.
For our listeners too, I think it would be great for our listeners that are just curious about beverage and may not even be in the industry, because mezcal can be a complicated category for those that are new to it. Can we start off just baselining it and first explain what mezcal is, and then let's talk about your interest in it?
Okay, so basically what mezcal is, I think, and this is, of course, my personal opinion, because I know most of the listeners would know what mezcal is technically speaking, right? And what the liquid is and so on. But I'm going to speak more about what mezcal is for me. And in my perspective, mezcal is not just a spirit or not just something that you can get from a shelf. It speaks truly about the history of Mexico, and especially a product or a process that has not been touched for many years by industrial hands or by outsiders to the tradition of it. Right? It is mainly produced outside of Mexico in the mountains. Let's say in villages, small villages outside of Mexico City, and outside of many cities such as Oaxaca City and so on. It's basically a spirit, and I'm speaking about maybe 30 years ago, how it was. And it was something hidden that you didn't ever heard about. Previous generations, like my parents or my grandparents, they didn't know anything about mezcal either. I mean, only people from those villages were very close to it, because it's something that has been passed from tradition since the colony, or mainly even before that, from hand to hand or from generation to generation. And that's how it was, let's say, deeply embedded into the rural villages of Mexico, right? And let's say like 20 something years ago, when the mezcal boom started, of course it was let's say driven by probably two main brands that initiated at that time, and especially that were taking mezcal to some other consumers outside of the ones close to the places where it was produced. So some of them probably bringing them to Mexico City or to other major cities in Mexico or to the US. It was also done like that. And when that started like 20 something years ago, it is when that the mezcal started to get some importance or some relevance as a spirit. So going back to what mezcal means to me, for me, it's a way of understanding the deep roots of Mexico and the indigenous culture behind it. Because even though nowadays it's still produced in that way, there are some efforts of, especially with now the scalability and the growing demand of this category, that we've tried to make some, let's say, to adapt it in a way that we can also bring it to some other people without breaking the handcraftness of the product, or also without, let's say, breaking the environmental balance that right now exists. So of course we have to change the way things do it, the way we do it, but not in a way that we, let's say, break the mezcal what it is, because we don't want to convert it in, for instance, what today is a tequila, right? They are two very different categories. The two of them are in very different places, focused for different kind of consumers, and they represent different things. So even though that there's a regulation, how we call it, a NOM for mezcal and for tequila and for other Mexican spirits, such as sotol, such as bacanora and raicillas, etc., that they are also, let's say, in the same path, because they are agave similar spirits, right? But each of them belong to a certain region, and each of them have like a certain scope or reach on how they are, or let's say how they can be made, or how can they supply the demand that right now there is.
Diego, you mentioned tequila there also. You're from Mexico, born your whole life. You've been there the whole time, correct?
Yes, born and raised. I'm from Mexico City. Unfortunately, I cannot say I'm from either Jalisco, Oaxaca, or some places where it originally tequila and all these spirits are made from. But I'm from Mexico City, and let's say here, some of the benefit is that we get a lot of things from many other parts of the country. And that's how I also got to know mezcal, raicilla, tequila, and so on. And then I got the chance to travel to see those places.
So the reason I'm asking about the Mexico, like the Mexican heritage background, did you ever want to leave? You talked about tequila, you talked about mezcal. Did you ever want to leave and make scotch or whiskey or vodka or wine? Or you're just so loyal and a traditionalist being from Mexico?
In my experience, I think mezcal is, it captures you. It's more like, even though, I mean, of course, I've had in my first years in my career that I was not involved very much in mezcal. of course, my projection and what I wanted to do in my career, my opportunities was to go abroad, right? And go to some other distilleries and so on. But at the end of the day, whenever I started to get involved and more involved into this world of mezcal, especially, I had not just the feeling, but also like the commitment, or something grew in me. I had to give something back. And I was in the position that I could ensure that this traditional spirit that speaks is a way of how the communities speak through this product, that I was able to help, let's say, to penetrate this market and to bring this liquid and this expression of their work to others. So I felt at the end it was like that was my mission. Today, I feel that that is my mission. And of course, I've had these thoughts of going to other spirits and so on. But today, I see it more of learning about other spirits and what can we apply into the mezcal industry in order to make this mezcal, let's say, the mezcal word, to bring it in a bigger way, in a more sustainable way, and to preserve these traditions, and of course, let's say, allowing more people to know it.
Yeah, that's a really good mission to be on, Diego. Can you give our listeners a peek into a day and a life of your gig? What does it look like for you?
Definitely, one of the things that I love most about my job is that every day is different, right? And every day has its challenges, and every day there can be some boring days, but most of the days are very, very exciting. I would like to say that there are in my role, or what I do, is basically focused on 4 aspects, right? So the first 2 are more on the production part, which is all the agronomical part. So we take care of all the agave plantations that we do for the Casa Lumbre brands, and also for other brands from other companies that we also do some agriculture for them. So I take care a lot of key decisions that impact not just the agave itself, but mostly also the people around it. And then the second part in production is the liquid, right? And the distillery, the management of distilleries. This in the same way for mezcal mainly, and sometimes for tequila. There's some decisions that have to be made around the people that surround and that work in there, and so on. And then we have the second part of my job that I think is the one that I love the most doing, and is taking care of all the soft aspects of it. So I would speak more about the social and environmental part, because many of those decisions, or most of those decisions, impact directly the people that we work directly with or indirectly with, because there's many people that work inside the distillery or in the fields that we manage, and that they do the labor and so on. But there's also many people that are around it, right? Such as suppliers, such as I could also say people that lease land for us to plant, or people that we also buy liquid from them, because we integrate our whole mezcal supply, not just from a mezcal that we produce by ourselves, but also by a network of small producers that we gather mezcal from. And this is basically because even though that we want to integrate vertically, but we also want to include in this integration, or in our process, external producers, because they are the traditional producers, and there's a lot of our mission that we want to do there. So mainly in my day-to-day, business decisions are part of it, and they are driven especially of how we can manage and how we can make sure that the product is done well, and that they're like basic normal business decisions. But the key ones are the ones that we have to take care of all the other parts. So how are we going to make a business decision, and what's the impact that is going to bring to communities, to people, to the environment? And those are the ones that are most difficult to make, because some of them, normally a social decision or a good decision in social aspect or environmental aspect, is normally not going to be the one that you're going to directly think it's going to be the best or the most, let's say, straightforward for the business. So you have to go around it, shape it. Part of our values is that we build all our strategy in creating shared value. And what does that mean? Is that we will bring value, of course, for the business, while also building value for the environmental and for the social aspects that we want to build. So for society. And one of the key things that I've been doing in my entire career, let's say, is to have that clear. Every time that I have to make a decision, I always have to consider the social and environmental aspects way before the business aspects. And that way, if we make, let's say, if we consider all those variables together, we are sure that we're gonna do, let's say, or take the best decision that is gonna sustain itself for the coming years. Because if you only consider the business part of it, it's not going to be sustainable. At some point in its time, it's just not going to go through, or it's not going to be sustaining itself for many years, right? So that's basically, let's say, day-to-day decisions have to be done like that. So a normal day for me would be then go. I travel a lot to Oaxaca, to Jalisco, or to Puebla, where our main operations are. And of course, let's say, to be in touch with the people and be in touch with the environment and take the decisions inside, because that is the only way that you can grasp all the aspects of that decision and understand what do you have to do, basically.
Diego, I can totally relate with you. I love my job because no 2 days are the same, right? You're never bored. You're always being challenged. And it sounds like you have a lot of decisions to make, right? Every day, something little, something big. So I'm curious, who do you rely on? Do you have like a friend or a family or somebody that, you bounce ideas off to them, maybe a mentor? And then part two, is there somebody that got you to where you are today? Like, was there like a moral compass, like somebody that was always like, hey, this is maybe a better idea, or why don't you try this instead? Or because it sounds like you're very loyal to your values and traditions, and it's very refreshing.
So basically, I'm going to attack first, let's say, part two. I think I couldn't name just one person, let's say. I think I would say about probably three key persons that made me or helped me to take these decisions during my entire career. So first one, of course, I think it's mostly my family, my parents, that they've always, since I was young, taught me with example of how this should be done and how decisions should be taken, personal, professional, any kind of decisions. And they formed me with this, let's say, criteria, right? And there's two other people that were key in my career. The first one was a former boss in Pernod Ricard, Noel Adrian, whom he has plenty of experience. He used to run the business in Pernod. He's a French expat that ended up being CEO in Mexico City, and for Pernod Ricard Mexico. And he and I, we identified, let's say, ourselves, or we had something in common that was this vision of doing shared value. So when I had the opportunity to work with him in Mexico, we had many conversations, and we had a very common task of doing business this way. And that's, in fact, I will answer also question one, because it's in fact how I got involved with mezcal and how I got involved in all these aspects. Because when I was doing, let's say, having these talks with him, in Pernod Ricard, there was going on a project that was called the Youth Action Council. And this Youth Action Council was like an internal election for people under 30s, that you would do like put yourself for an election, and you would make some like kind of campaign of what were your beliefs and so on. And at the end, they will elect someone of each function of the company worldwide. And that election was done by CEOs, let's say by C-level members of Pernod Ricard, and of course the executive committee of Pernod Ricard Global and so on. And I was, let's say, I was selected as part of the operations, let's say the operations representative for that position. And that gave me the chance not just to be really close in touch with him, and that's how I got to know him, but also to share many ideas, especially on this mission that I was telling you about. And of course, with that said, he gave me the opportunity at some point. He said, Diego, I know I was at that time as a coordinator for the engineering team. He told me, I know you have this mission. I know you want to do this. Why don't you propose me a project and pitch the project? And if something, let's see how it is, and if we can make it become true. So my project was to do something about developing a brand or developing a project that could help mezcal villages and mezcal producing villages to sustain themselves economically, let's say by selling us their mezcal or by doing business with us. So how could we develop a brand, but not just by the sake of developing a brand, but by helping a community? So it was more of a social responsible project. And with a team in Mexico, he told me, okay, get together with other people and see if you can make this project reality. To let's say, I'm going to make the long story short, but at the end of the day, that's when he gave me the chance to dedicate full time to this project. I went to live to Oaxaca. So I moved let's say I lived in Oaxaca for 3-4 years around. I went to these villages to live and to understand mezcal and to get like a deep grasp of it. And that's when I understood that mission, that at the beginning, it was just like an idea. It was something that I wanted to personally do. You know, in business, things change a lot and it's very dynamic. At the end, let's say we didn't develop a mezcal brand, but we developed a project or an idea that later on we were able to get it on top of a brand, right? Then I started to move on with this mezcal project in Pernod Ricard. And I also had a chance later on, let's say like 4 years later, to be part of and to manage the agricultural part of tequila. And that's when I understood also the agricultural part, because I'm not an agronomist. I'm not an agronomic engineer. So it's not part of my career, but that's how I got involved, because it has something in common that is not just the environment, but also the people. And agronomy has also that in common, that even though that is something for business, it's deeply related with people and with environment. And then after, let's say, that path, I also met someone really key, the second person really key in my career, that is Ivan Saldaña, that I know he's been a guest before with you. And he was previously at some point also a Pernod Ricard employee. So I knew about him, but we didn't meet because when I went in, he went out also to found Casa Lumbre. So we didn't meet as colleagues, but we met later on as colleagues of the industry, right? And of course, I always admired his path and his career and what he did with mezcal and with different brands such as Montelobos, such as Ojo de Tigre, and many other Casa Lumbre brands, Abasolo, all those brands were holding this Mexican heritage in a global brand, right? And we met at some congresses, at some bars, at some restaurants. We had like some points in common, right? And we always had talks because we shared the same beliefs, we shared the same ideas, and we shared the same mission, but we were both in different companies. And let's say at some point I take a decision in my career where I wanted to change and to go back from the agave in tequila, go back to mezcal, right? And I saw that opportunity to be able to be done in Casa Lumbre. So I got in touch with Ivan. And Ivan, at some point, he also had working for Casa Lumbre was something that I always wanted to be part of and so on. But you know, things have to align. And at the time of this call, things were aligned because Ivan was with this idea of founding this business unit that today I lead, that is Mezcales Atresanales Casa Lumbre. And this business unit is in charge of all the production in the agronomical part and also in the liquid part for mezcal brands. He told me that he saw in me also a way that we had a mission and a vision aligned, so that I was a good candidate to undertake this mission of founding this new business unit. And then he invited me to this project, which I'm very grateful for that time. I spoke to Noel that He was mentoring in Pernod for me, and he said, "Well, Diego, of course, I think it's something that if you truly believe in that, I think it's a very good path that you can take." So today, if I would have to speak about two mentors, let's say in my professional life, it would be definitely Noel and Ivan as part of them, especially with Noel with this inspiration in the social aspects. He's just an excellent person in terms of knowing what to do and how to drive a social impact. He always had that concern, and he always warned me and gave me very, very good advice on what decisions to make and still today when I'm in this crisscross of decision and say, okay, what should I do? Because I have to deliver in the business, but I also have my personal and professional beliefs on my mission, and I have to deliver for the people that I feel responsible of making those good decisions and the environment. He is one of the key persons that I always give him a call and ask him what would he do. Today he's retired, so he's now mentoring, and he's an excellent coach. He stayed to live in Mexico City because he fell in love with Mexico. So everything is, and now he's dedicated. He's a philanthropist on that, and he also gives advice to many companies. I think it's not just me that considers him that way, but many people. And the other guy, Ivan, he is also not just to my current boss, but I consider him as a mentor and as a key person on how I take decisions. Even though with let's say the three founders of Casa Lumbre, Ivan, Moises, and Danny, whom I've learned a lot about them, and of course I have to deliver results to them as a company, and they trust in the decisions that I make. But many times I have to always consult with them. What would you do if you were in these key decisions and you had to make this decision? And they give me advice more than telling me what to do, and that's something that I always appreciate of having this management and having these leaders as part of my career. Because in Casa Lumbre, one of the key cultural facts of it is that you have total freedom, but with total responsibility, right? So
I love that. I want that on a shirt.
Yes,
Total
it's something that
with total responsibility, because with total freedom does come, I mean, come on,
Story of my life.
Yeah, right? You're really held accountable. I would love to go back to something that you said, Diego. You mentioned the mezcal villages, and because you've been in the industry now for long enough to have really experienced the mezcal boom, right? I mean, we know, like you mentioned, like 30 years ago, 20 years ago, it was like pretty much like Del Maguey, and then eventually like Illegal. Like, there wasn't a whole lot that people were hip to, truly. And so with that said, when you revisit or when you spend time in villages that produce mezcal, what benefits have the villages received due to the mezcal boom? And then also on the flip side, what challenges have you seen for the villagers?
I'm going to speak first about the challenges, because I think speaking about the challenges will make more obvious not just the benefits that today they're getting or they are lacking, but also what we are trying to do, or the reason why we are trying to do with all this. There are many challenges. Let's say the first one, it becomes, let's say, an access to market. These villages are not just far away in terms, let's say, logistically speaking, because that's a reality, right? So, for instance, one of the villages that we work very close with, that is Santa Ana del Rio, has to Oaxaca City. It's like a 2.5 hour drive in a car. So and there's no way a truck can enter. There's no way that they can manage doing business by themselves. Logistically speaking, it's very difficult. They face a very, very big obstacle there. So one of them is this access to market, but also from a legal perspective. In Mexico, you have to understand that all the legislation and all the ways for a person or for a small business, for a family business to make mezcal and commercialize it, and bring it to the market or to a liquor shop or wherever, it's not. They have to comply with many aspects, such as like their social security, social registrations, legal things, such as with the health ministry and and taxation and so on. And you have to remember that these villages are villages that are very isolated from formality. So these villages, let's say, for instance, mezcal producers mostly in these kind of communities, Spanish is not even their first language, right? It's they speak an indigenous language such as Zapotec or other. And of course, even though they speak Spanish, it's not their mother tongue. Their access or their scholarity is null, right? They don't have any in their previous life. They probably did only elementary school if they had the chance in their village to have access to that. So for them to understand, or especially to be able to get into the system of taxation and bank accounts and all that, it's a very, very big challenge. Today, many of their children or their nephews are the ones that are helping them. But at that point that I'm speaking about 10 years ago, this was one of the first challenges that I saw. So it was access to it from a legal perspective. Of course, you see a lot of challenges on, well, let's say, since with this lack of access, there's what we call the coyotes, or these kind of intermediaries that are very sometimes abusive intermediaries, are the ones that make their way through in this kind of business, right? Because they are the ones that connect the very isolated people and their very isolated villages with these kind of situations with the market. But normally these intermediaries are very abusive. So brands, as you were mentioning, many of them built this bridge to get rid of these intermediaries and do it in a more fair way, right? But of course, that's not all the mezcal producers had let's say the luck or the privilege to meet one of these brands. And because these brands at some point, let's say they adopted them or to take care of how they're going to take care of their liquid into let's say to the market, how they're going to make that possible, keeping a fair balance, keeping a fair wage, keeping legal background, protecting them. And brands such as the ones that you mentioned did that. So, but many others, they didn't have that luck or that privilege. And many others, they were just at the mercy of these intermediaries that abused them. So also that built in many villages like a kind of shell where they wanted to protect themselves. And they didn't believe in people. Like at the beginning, when I was doing my research and going to these villages and get to know people, it's not an easy task. And I mean, it's not an easy task in getting their confidence or their trust to do business with you. So let's say that's one of the challenges. Then another challenge would be the environmental challenges. They face a lot of environmental challenges because of, let's say, a lack of vision of information that they had in their lifetime, right? I'm just going to speak, let's say, an example, right? At their scale, if I have a small distillery, I am able to produce mezcal and get the wood out of the forest that I have just behind me in my community, right? Which at that scale, it's probably not a problem because the replacement of those trees, it's still balanced. But whenever the industry starts growing, then the demand of those natural resources starts to become higher than the replacement. And what happens to that? It's a negative impact on the mezcal on the environment. I mean, mezcal production is never going to be positive impact. Of course, it has an environmental impact. But what we want to drive is a balanced impact, right? And when it starts growing, of course, if they just scale it and just repeat, or they just grow the same way that they used to produce, and at some point it's going to be unbalanced. So the other challenge that I see that is very, very deeply attached is how can we bring and how can we make this balance to be present, even though the demand is growing. And there are many initiatives that we are applying there, such as composting, such as having certified wood from, let's say, firewood from certified forests, that are managed by the environmental ministry in Mexico and so on, and many other practices that we also try to bring it to these villages. And the third challenge that I see that they are facing, and I think is the most important one or the most tangible one for them, is the economical. And it's mainly driven by these abusive intermediaries that they paid very, very low prices for mezcal that they were selling at high prices outside in the market. Or today, what companies such as the ones you mentioned and us as well, that we are making huge efforts on how can we bring fair value to these villages, and how can we bring not just the fair value, but also a value that that is good enough for them to, let's say, to live from that, and not just them, their families to live from that. Because what you want to bring, and the first challenges that you made, is that you have these families that make amazing liquid, and this handcraft liquid that is selling at $50-$60 a bottle in the US. They don't have a decent way of living, and I mean decent. They don't have access to basics of that we would consider, right? So that challenge of how can you ensure that these families are making the money that they need in order to give their children decent meals every day, have a nutritious balance, let's say, in their income, and also provide whatever they need in order for their children to be able to attend to school and to have health, let's say, to be able to have a correct health system for them. Because unfortunately, they are so isolated that also the government has forgot about them. So they don't even have access to public programs or to social programs, or they are also sometimes victims of. In Mexico, unfortunately, it's very hard to. It's very like sad that many governments or many they take they want to make like or take advantage on a political way with these economic programs, and they end up just using them. And that's something that all the time, whatever we've done in whatever I've done with in Pernod Ricard with the brands that I was involved, such as also I was involved with Del Maguey at some point, and in Casa Lumbre with Ojo de Tigre and so on, that we always do everything, let's say, with NGOs and with us. We try right now not to get involved with governmental programs, because most of the time they're contaminated with this vision, and it's something that we don't want to be part of that, right? And it's something that many other brands that I know have done that effort as well, and I think that's the biggest challenge. So just summarizing, it's the economic one, the environmental one, and the legal aspect of all the production and all where they live.
Awesome.
So yeah, thank you.
Lots of challenges, right?
So many challenges. It's really amazing. I know Jessica has a quick question for you.
Yeah, I'm always curious when we chat and meet and talk to people. So in all your travels, Diego, right, all over the world, and being from Mexico and doing what you're doing, what do you drink? What's your favorite drink? If you went for a drink with us, what would you order?
Of course, I would always order a mezcal, but normally when I drink a mezcal, or when I would look for a mezcal, something very, very specific is that I would always ask for either an arroqueño or a tepestate. Those are my favorite varieties or species of agave, regardless the brand. Normally, right. I am very fan of understanding new brands and knowing what new brands are bringing on, especially different kinds of varieties of agave, because I'm a very curious consumer, and every time that I see the mezcal menu, I always want to try something different. So as long as it's a mezcal, I know it's going to be good.
I love it. I love it. You know, with that said, I want to just thank you so much for coming on Served Up, Diego. You've just been a delight. I know that you have really dropped some serious knowledge today on our curious listeners, our Mezcal curious listeners. And with that said, on behalf of Jessica and myself, I just want to wish you some great health and a lot of peace. And thank you for coming on our show.
No, thank you very much for inviting me and being able to share our vision and what we are doing with mezcal. And of course, the mission that we are driving Casa Lumbre with all this with all the spirits, not just mezcal, because with all the Mexican spirits, we try to bring the same mission, the same vision, and always bring fairness to the community and to all the sourcing of raw materials that we need to make our spirits and innovations.
Wonderful.
So special.
Yeah.
Thank you, Diego.
Thanks for listening. Served Up is brought to you by Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits. Produced by Zunu.online. Music by We Killed the Lion can be found on Spotify. Make sure to subscribe to be notified of our future Served Up episodes. Cheers.